to check to see if it's live or not live, so that page was waiting.
I said, got it on his computer, and I said, got it on mine.
Good. All right, so we got an upcoming meeting. That's the good.
Good.
At least we're able to find that.
But why does it keep doing this? Why does it open a meeting?
Oh, Mr. White,
Well,
how are you doing?
because that's the
Good.
video. That's
Hey there.
this, so you can exit out of this. Yeah.
That's you.
It should automatically if you're on that upcoming page, mine sometimes does. And I have to like reload.
What I do is I go to the public meeting page and then hit the live.
Yeah, probably a good idea to
Screen.
guess we'll get a head start on things. Welcome to the July 12th, 2023 DAR large meeting in the public meeting room in 2 George Street. My name is Jay White, and I'll be serving as chair this afternoon and early evening. Other board members present this afternoon are Luda Subject, who will recuse on item 4, 122, 124 Cannon, James Metters, Seton Brown, Andy Bellows, and our alternate this evening, who will be recusing on item number 6, 56 State Street. City staff present are Lawrence Courtney, Travis Galley. Applicants have been required to submit any documents in advance of the meeting. Staff will control the slide presentation, or you can use the angle clicker. That includes everything submitted by the applicant by the deadline in accordance with school requirements. Applicants simply need to ask staff in advance if you don't want to use the clicker, and applicant staff and board members are required to give their names and speak. We don't need that. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed to the City of Charleston Public Meeting channel on YouTube. Your appearance here is your consent to be recorded. The order of the meeting will be as follows. First, an introduction and overview of the project by city staff, and then an applicant presentation with a 10-minute time limit, or as determined by the chair, by request of the applicant. Any questions of the applicant really ought to be asked right after that presentation. Any presenters, clearly state your name for the record. Any persons affiliated with the project, be it owners, developers, designers, consultants, should speak during this portion rather than during public comment. This will be followed by public comment. Written public comments were distributed yesterday to the board members in accordance with the deadline, and written comments will not be read aloud during the meeting unless requested by a member of the board and with the permission of the chair. Any member of the public who wishes to be heard in person on an agenda item is requested to state their name and address for the record. Be reminded that there is a 2-minute time limit for those remarks unless extended by the chair. The applicant does not respond to comments made during the public comments portion. This will be followed by city staff comments or recommendation, and then a 2-minute or actually 5-minute applicant response period or clarification period to either public comments or city staff comments. You don't have to use this if you don't feel it's necessary. Then it comes down to a board discussion and vote. Applicant may clarify inaccurate information when recognized by the chair by raising a hand and waiting to be called upon. Board members will be polled by the chair for comments and for their vote on a motion. The chair shall reread the motion verbatim, and the board member making the motion should correct the chair if he has not reread the motion accurately. Once a motion is in proper order and seconded, each member when voting should respond yea in favor or nay not in favor. And the results will be posted on the city website. Items 82 Mary Street, 529 King Street, mock-up, 143 Calhoun Street, and 657 King Street have been withdrawn by the applicant. As a reminder, please turn off all cell phones and other distracting devices and limit your comments to architecture. Okay. So move on to first item, approval of minutes from the June 28th, 2023 meeting. Any comments or motions? Motion to approve. Do I have a second? I'll second. Approved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Passed unanimous.
Okay, and the second and third items on the agenda, application items B1 and B2 have been withdrawn by the applicants. Brings us to item B3, which is 176 Concord Street, otherwise known as the Charleston Waterfront Hotel, otherwise known as the Cooper, right? Which is new construction. It's in a type District 56/30B. It's in the old city district. And they are requesting approval of the following exterior design elements. Expanded glazing area at the second floor lobby and restaurant. Expanded glazing and design refinements at the 6th floor penthouse. And a metal balcony rail cap enhancement. So, with that, we will turn it over to the applicant for their presentation.
Good afternoon, Nathan Schutte with McMillan Pasco Smith. Appreciate the board's attention to this. This is a unique situation where we get to come to you tonight and ask for things we think make the project better. Construction is going well at the hotel, and as such, we're learning things along the way. As Mr. Courtney expressed, we're really focused on 3 elements tonight: expanding glazing at our lobby and restaurant level, some expanded glazing at the 6th floor, and then some rail enhancements. So to kind of walk you through where those take place, we've included some elevations here. The upper elevation is proposed, the lower elevation is existing as approved. You'll see red outlines for the areas we're talking about. So on the water-facing facade, the east facade, we're talking about expanding the glazing on that first elevated level on the right-hand side. So you'll see the red outlines. There's 4 windows on this facade at that first elevated level. We're effectively changing from 2 bays wide to 4 bays wide. Similarly, at the 6th level of the top floor, you'll see, as currently approved, what that 6th level looks like. We are proposing expanding the glass significantly at that upper level as it faces the harbor. The glazing, we are also proposing to expand the glazing to the north here on the first elevated level. So above the port cochere canopy, you'll see a line of windows. We're expanding that line of windows from a 2-bay to a 4-bay window for that public lobby level. It also includes the 2 side windows in the courtyard. So there's a window on each side so that they're consistent across that entire level. Those are the 2 areas of glazing that we would like to expand in the project. So with that in a little bit more detail, we provided some renderings. The upper rendering here, you can see 2 of those windows facing the harbor that we'd like to expand the glazing on. It's symmetrical to the other side. Here in the motor court, and you can see all of the expanded glazing on at the first elevated level as it wraps the corner from our lobby into our restaurant. And then up here at the 6th level, we're opening up the wings primarily. We did include some architectural detail refinements. These are all details. We're using details that have been used everywhere else on the project. Some of these things occur at the 6th level, and we're carrying over here to broaden the glazing, or at the lower levels, we're using the same window opening details. So there's no new details, it's just a new configuration of broader openings. Thank you. One other thing I do want to point out as a change from the existing as approved to the proposed is there was a line of columns that effectively interfere in the new solution, and we removed that line of columns to allow the freedom of the view and freedom of the glass at the top of the project. So you'll see that change as well. That is part of what we're asking. The third element beyond the glass that we're talking about tonight is the addition of a rail profile to the top of the balconies. We built mock-ups of this before. Now we've got the actual balconies on site. We're standing there touching, feeling the top of these things. Frankly, we feel didn't have enough weight and weren't really comfortable to stand next to. So having gone through several different profiles, we would like to use this King's architectural metal profile. It's 2 3/4 inch wide profile that we would simply layer to the top as depicted in the details and the drawings there to finish the upper portion of the rail. I actually think it balances the visual characteristic of the rail much better than that, just that unbelievably thin top rail we currently have approved. So with that, those are the changes we're proposing or asking for your approval on this evening. Happy to answer any questions for our application. I tried, Jay, I tried.
I mean, that was really pretty quick.
Thanks.
Any questions to the applicant?
Two questions.
Certainly.
When you shared on the 6th floor element that the columns were interrupting, it's not interrupting the design, it's interrupting the view from the inside.
Yeah.
Okay.
And actually, in its final, in the way it was configured, unintended consequences, they effectively made the balcony space unusable. There wasn't enough space up there for them, and really you can't put furniture or anything up there. And we actually think it's a cleaner solution with the expanded glass to just eliminate them and let the glazing and the detailing on the building stand on its own.
And my other question on page 2, in the new proposal, it looks like there's a colonnade that goes the full width of the building now, where in the approved elevation, that is not there.
You're talking about the 6th floor?
Yeah.
So that's the pilaster detailing of the windows. Those are not columns. If we go back to the renderings, what you're looking at in that elevation,
Not right there.
not here,
Not there.
okay,
Let's go to page 2.
okay, certainly.
Right here.
Oh, that's
And it's not on the.
that's because we didn't put it in that print. Those trellises are part of the approved drawings.
They are?
Yes, they are.
I'll defer to city staff to make sure that they are.
They are. That was on us when we did the comparison.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
This is a minor one, just, I don't know the building like y'all do. We don't have floor plans, so is that whole top floor where you're adding the windows, is that all restaurant space? Just trying to understand how it's.
The top floor, no, the top floor here is a suite all the way across.
Okay. So go
This
to
is all
your,
restaurant space.
so go to your rendering, the 3D stuff. So, no. So all of that stuff up there at the top, that's a suite,
Yes.
one suite?
Yes, sir. It's a nice suite.
Just trying to understand how
Yeah.
things are used.
It's one unit.
More flashy.
More flashy, yes, it's more flashy, more detail, more all of the fun stuff.
What's the depth on the 6th floor? I mean, I wish I had the original plans.
You're talking about the space in front here?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's somewhere around 10 feet, it may not even be quite 10 feet. from
And the
where
columns
it's
went
at.
out how far?
They split the difference,
Okay, so right.
they're right at 5 feet, which made the space odd because we weren't in front of them or behind them, they were just in the middle of the space.
No other questions? Any public comment? Hearing none. City staff comments, recommendations?
Okay, well, in the grand scheme of this project, staff finds that these are relatively minor alteration requests. And while staff does prefer the repetitive and rhythmic administration arrangement as it currently exists on the north elevation, we find that the large facade can handle this change as on the larger glazing, which currently exists at this level on similar eastern elevation. The design refinements at 6th floor penthouse are mainly as Ms. Schutte explained, a result of a relatively shallow balcony. The columns were just in the way. That really does not have a problem with losing the columns, just because, again, in the grand scheme of things, on the expense of the building, the columns would likely be lost anyway. And because of the sight lines from relatively narrow public right of way, which is the extension of Waterfront Park, there's really not, the sightlines aren't all that good anyway. The cantilever roof is interesting because that is something that we did have to ponder a bit, and again, our conclusion was that in the grand scheme of things, on that large expanse of that elevation, it would just be lost anyway, largely. And lastly, the rail cap is a welcome addition, giving a bit of heft to an otherwise very spindly railing. Additionally, staff almost always advocates for a slightly tighter spacing of the pickets. That's all we've got.
And your recommendation?
Excuse me. And our recommendation is approval within 4 conditions.
Okay, comment response?
We appreciate staff's time and their coordination. Thank you.
Okay, board discussion.
Well, I think the windows, that's an easy thing. I think it's so much better with the windows and the railing. I'm surprised y'all didn't have a heavier railing to begin with. So no issues there. I do think that the overhang, and I understand why, can you go to that 3D view? You've got a very traditional element that's being used in a very non-traditional way with this big heavy cornice. And I disagree. I think, because I just happened to see it in the water yesterday, I think that's going to be very prominent. I mean, that's the top of the building. So it may be, I understand why you want to lose the columns, but it may be that you push the overhang back, but you have engaged columns that have a little bit more depth. So the windows in between are recessed, protecting them from the rain, but then you still see the proportions. So I think that bottom left one is much stronger than the top. So personally, I just don't think it's, I understand the need for it, but this is off the building, it's really getting flat, and you have this sort of, I think, an awkward overhang. The other thing I think that would be worth looking at is how the transition, so in the top right image, you've got this pretty heavy entablature that just sort of stops on, I guess that's the east facade. And then you've got this lower belt course that just sort of, I guess it's a cornice, I don't know what that is, it just sort of stops, but they don't, they don't, you know what I'm talking about there? And that's why I was asking, could you just take that same language that you have, I guess that's the east, and wrap it around and then have that entablature kill into the bump out there. I did a bunch of glass, but it's big sweet anyway. So I don't know, but I just think there's a, and maybe you don't know what I'm talking about. So it's this stuff right here that just doesn't quite work. So, I mean, I think the changes are good. I just think that top part, personally, I think.
Further board comments?
I agree with Mr. Bello. I appreciate the columns as they are, and the cantilever looks awkward to me. And I don't understand. We don't care about use, if that makes sense. It's more so of the design elements and removing the design elements. detracts from the building. I personally prefer the windows on the second floor of the lobby to stay as they are, but understand staff comments as well.
Further comments or a motion?
I'm in agreement with both of you. I think it's, if you will lose columns, that the temperature will look unfinished, unneeded. So I understand about furniture, just put the smaller furniture there, I guess. But it is a kind of classical portico on the top with the columns. So so I think rest of this glazing and rails obviously is a good change. So you may will need to restudy that again.
We want to take a whack at a motion.
James, you want to do that?
Do you have any comments?
No, I move in agreement with you all.
Well, all right, I'll move for approval of the changes except for the top floor area and a restudy, I guess deferral for removing the columns and those changes in there.
Okay, so that's sort of a little bit of a split motion.
Well, we can just say deferral. I mean, they know what to do. They can come back with the columns, just not make the changes, or there might be something in between. I think if you push and pull it a little bit, you can get more terrace, just keep it down. I think there needs to be some kind of resolution with how that happens. Sorry, I can't make short version.
Okay, how about we say deferral with more comments to restudy top floor? Perfect. Okay. Made by Mr. Bello. Your second.
Second.
Mrs. Brown. Call roll. Mrs. Subchuk, how do you vote?
Yeah,
Mr. Betters?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yeah, in favor.
Mr. Bello?
Okay,
I vote likewise. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is B4, which is 122 and 124 Cannon Street. It is a Category 4 building. It is in Canberra, Elliotsboro neighborhood. It is in the 2.5 and 3 height district. It's circa 1840 on the old in the old city district. And there are some context slides here. And with that, we'll yeah.
I'm Ashley Jennings with AD Architects. With me tonight are my client Tom Howard and David Betts, and also with us tonight is Jessica Callahan from SGA and W, and they're going to talk about the landscape plan. So I'm going to introduce the project quickly and then turn it over to him. There are 4 buildings on this project, so I'm trying to move through them quickly. Obviously, you know the site. Some of you haven't seen this project before. We're here for preliminary approval. We've gotten conceptual. And the site exists with 2 existing 4 structures on the front, with a proposal for new 2 structures in the back. There's some modifications to the existing structures and everything's been approved conceptually, so we're here for preliminary tonight. So in the time since we've been here previously, we've been starting to develop the site plan, we've been to TRC, we're working on the parking and the drainage and the stormwater, and getting those things tied up nicely. And our first task in this set to review is to talk about the perimeter of the property, which is the edge of the property. We've started to develop some details of that, and you can see here that we're starting to look at how the buildings present on the front and how they present to their neighbors. And we're starting with wrought iron on the front. As you can see, the front two buildings, there is an established wrought iron system in front of 122, which is the one on the north of the slide. And we're adding to that on the lower portion of the site. The existing wrought iron we don't believe is in good enough shape to be able to salvage, but we're proposing to put something back fairly similar to what's there now. And it consists of a low wall, low masonry wall with stucco with a cap, and then wrought iron, just a simple wrought iron rail in between for the gate. They'll be open most of the time, and that's the gate that follows the other one to Amwood Park. This is just a detail of the trash enclosure that's going into the site. And you can see that we're proposing wrought iron at the front and then a wood screen wall as we move around the property. There's one instance where we have a masonry wall, and that's on the back of 122, and I'll show you that a little bit later. Now I'm going to introduce Joe and let him talk a little bit about the landscape plan.
Good evening, Joseph O'Callaghan. I'm a landscape architect with SGA NW Design. You can see the site plan remains unchanged since conceptual approval, except we have advanced the design, refined the details, and we got to select materials. To maintain as much pervious area as possible, we're utilizing gravel on the larger parking area, and we're also using a true clay brick pervious paver in the patio areas and on the secondary parking area. For the pool enclosure, we are proposing a painted brick that will match architecture with wrought iron infill that will also match the architecture. The pool deck will be a select bluestone, and the wall facing the south, which faces the street, will be a solid brick wall with to obscure the pool from view from the street, and this will have a creeping dig to mask that brick facade. Overall, we feel the materials, select bluestone, brick, tabby concrete are traditional Charleston garden materials, and they fit within the context of historic downtown. And similarly with the plant palette that you see there on our site plan sheet, these lush plantings create that courtyard feel, which is typical for downtown Charleston. If there are no questions, I'll hand it back to Ashley.
So we talked about the perimeter design, we talked about the site itself. And these are the landscape drawings that we're starting to look at material, patio, furniture, and things like that too. Here's that that enclosure we talked about. It's painted brick because the structure that's behind it is also painted brick. This is the street pitch from Hammond Street, looking at the buildings and looking at that enclosure. And you can see the two proposed buildings in the background. And I'm going to start with 122 Cannon, which is the building that's on the easternmost side of the property that fronts Calhoun Street. This building is slated for very little change on the exterior, except for the removal of a stairwell that's in the piazza, and the piazza will be reconstructed. There's also a new brick stoop that you can see in the kitchen hyphen that's behind the original structure. And the final thing that's going to be changed about the structure is that in the element. There was an attic space that was tiny that's going to be removed, and that's now just the wall in that space. So from a detailing standpoint, that's what we're providing in this package. The intent is to restore all the materials and add that one brick patio, that brick stoop. And you can see here, the intent is to repair that area of the piazza with in-kind materials so that it works with the existing. And this is just a diagram to show you what we're proposing to do in that living space in that back structure. Detailing of that stoop itself. And behind the structure is a mechanical enclosure, and we're proposing a brick enclosure there, and you can see how that brick wall would transition to the wood wall that would be the perimeter wall, kind of a graceful transition there. So the next building we're going to talk about is 122.5, which is the building directly behind 122. This is a new structure. It's a duplex, and it is a painted brick structure. This has changed a bit since you last saw it. Previously, there was a porch element on the first story on the west portion of the building, and we've done a little bit of redesign on that one because the balcony was in an odd area and shifted the balcony over to that left element. And now there's a steel canopy that protects that door in the middle portion of the building. Otherwise, the building hasn't changed. The material palette here is proposed to be painted brick veneer, a true standing seam metal roof. We've got a steel canopy and a steel balcony on the front of the structure. Aluminum clad, simulated divided light, basement windows. And the front stoop is concrete with a brick paper on top of it. And that's 122.5. Now we'll move to 124, which is the other existing historic structure on the front and the street. And there's a proposal here for an addition on the back and some modifications to the piazza, including removing the stairwell that goes from the first to second floor on the piazza, removing the side stair that opens into the piazza, and recreating the piazza screen wall on the front of the structure. And you can see that proposal here, which was approved at conceptual level. Mr. Miller suggested we put fewer steps in the front, and we've done that as well. And then you can see here that that's the addition that we're proposing with a small hyphen and an addition. And the material palette on this one has not really changed since we proposed it at conceptual level, since we detailed more to it. There are some larger windows in the hyphen that are intended to be fixed, but the rest of the windows are to be aluminum, on the addition of the aluminum clad windows with simulated divided lights. The infill, the hyphen, is a true exterior material 1x6 nipple gap, and then on the addition it's a true exterior 1x8 nipple gap. We're proposing architectural shingles for this building because the existing structure has architectural shingles. There's a brick terrace and steps, which you can see in the section here, that comes off of the hyphen, and then the addition will be a CMU base with a 3-coat needs to be stucco. Some details. And this is the section through that new piazza screen wall. And finally, is 124.5, which is the rear structure, a duplex once again, that sits directly behind 124. This one has changed slightly as well, in that porch element that was on the west portion of the building has been replaced by a cantilever balcony system. We had the same problem that Mr. Shuby did in the last presentation where we created a porch that's a little too shallow. And so you can see that iteration here with the balcony, kind of looking at some of the elements that you see elsewhere in the city, but a more modern interpretation of a covered cantilever balcony element. We started to differentiate the siding and the elements of the building. And the material palette for this structure is proposed to be, in the primary volume, is a 1x8 channel gap siding that's run vertically. And the secondary volume is 1x4 channel gap that is run vertically as well. We have a proposed wood entry door for the main entry door. There you go. And then aluminum clad patio doors with simulated bio lights in the secondary element. And then aluminum clad double hung windows with simulated bio lights in the main structure. And because it's a low slope roof, we're proposing a single ply membrane roof on the roof itself. This building also has a CMU base with 3 coatings of stucco. There is a small reveal, as you can see, that runs all the way around the building that handles the transition from the board lengths on this product aren't long enough to go all the way down the building. So we tried to do that gracefully with a copper reveal there. You can see that it telegraphs all the way through the building. And these are just some images to show the changes in the 2 buildings in the rear. You can see the transition from the porch element to the structure without the porch on 122.5. Here's the change in 124 from a porch element to a here's just some images to show material palette. And exterior lighting.
Great. Any questions from the board?
One, Ashley, on 122.5, you talked about using an aluminum standing seam roof, and one of the slides had that it had a 212 pitch on it. Is it?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, if it can be a standing seam there as well, we would like for it to be even on the lower slope roof. If not, it could be a flat seam.
Additionally, on 122.5, it looked like in the initial proposal that was approved at conceptual that the roof line was initially proposed as higher, and then it was approved at lower, and in this proposal it's higher again.
No, the roof is exactly the same as the previous conceptual approval. So we did have a higher slope roof in the original, but if you go slide, you can see that we're not proposing to change the roof slope. You're right, it was steeper at one point, but now we're proposing to be the same.
If no other questions, then public comment.
Well, okay, staff thinks the project is progressing nicely with the applicant fine tuning, mostly minimally visible alterations at the rear structures. The sidewall front of 124 Cannon has been redesigned, they, as a solid wood fence with masonry piers and wood gates, to screen parking as was requested. A reveal is now shown at the horizontal joint, in the reverse board and batten siding that Ashley discussed. Copper reveal. And while this might be tightened up a little bit, I think it's not visually disruptive. Gutters and downspouts apparently have been eliminated, and staff could find no response on the requested age of the stair at 122. And it is understood that this stair is not original. Signage needs to be presented for approval at final. Material approvals need to be finalized by the board at the final as well. Staff conditions include: 1, the brick coping wall and wrought iron fencing in front of 122 Cannon is shown to be replaced. The existing should be retained and supplemented as necessary with like materials. I think Ashley mentioned that it was not salvageable. I would encourage our applicant to revisit that and salvage it if you can. The spacing between vertical fence boards at 124 Cannon should be adjusted from the 1 inch shown down to 1.5 inch. And staff recommendation is preliminary approval with board and staff conditions.
5 minutes for an applicant response.
I think that we can certainly consider salvaging the fence. It's completely covered with vine right now. And so we can only see pieces of it, but we'll clean the vine off and salvage it.
All right, more discussion.
I think it's a great project. I wasn't here last time, but all the stuff happening to the historic houses, those are staff review things, are all minor and they are what should be done. I think the designs are really well done. I appreciate the site work, materials. I like the changes that you made. Steel, so we can't leave it boards. I don't have some comments. I think it's a really nice project.
Other board comments?
So one more question, actually. Just page A 1.2. Thank you. it seems like right here, this alignment change right there is interesting with that top horizontal piece. It looks like it's the same height, but it's just it's metal that's finished off, and it seems to be heavy to me with just that top bar on there. Other than that, I think it's, I appreciate all the work you've done on the whole project.
Well, my comments align with Eddie's, and generally this project is one of a pattern that this applicant has had many occasions to refine. So I think the project, the recommendations from staff is appropriate. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion. I'd like to recommend final approval, not details of staff, because all the details are in there, not what they think of staff to review. If the fence needs to stay, I would just pull that out, because I think that staff can have to do it anytime. And same for if there's a refinement to be made for that one moment that James is pointing out there. I think that could be pulled out separately, if that's what I'm getting at, is I like to see final approval. I don't want to have to go to staff because it has everything that we need right here.
Okay, so
Sorry, I can't make short motions. Final approval. Final approval.
you want to just do final? All right, so we have a motion then for final approval without details to staff, including board comments. I would add, if you agree.
That's what it is.
All right, is there a second to that motion? I will second it just to get it out there. And I'll say that while it's really infrequent for us to exclude final review by staff on similar applications, there is a place for that. So I will second it just to get it out there for discussion and a vote. So just to reiterate the motion, final approval without details to staff, including board comments. Any, I'll go ahead and call the roll unless anybody has any comments to make about the motion. All right, starting out, Mr. Nutters, how do you vote?
Yay, not in favor.
Mr. Brown, how do you vote?
No, not in favor.
Mr. Fellow, how do you vote?
Yeah, in favor.
I vote yea in favor. The motion fails 2-2.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion for final approval with details to staff.
Can we talk about what those details are?
Go ahead.
Well, I think they have all the details they need.
And they may not.
I think they do, that's why
And
but if
that's
there
sort
aren't any, I think the applicant needs to know what details are missing.
I disagree that you think it's my job to say what's needed in details that aren't here. I disagree with that. It's not my job.
Okay, so we have a motion. We can do this all night. We have a motion for final approval with detailed staff. Made by Mr. Metters. Do you have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Sorry, been some discussion on that, so I'll call the roll again. Mr. Metters, how do you vote on this?
Yeah, in favor.
Mr. Brown?
Yay in favor.
Mr. Fellow?
Any in favor?
And I will vote yea in favor. Miraculously, 0 passes. All right.
Four months of staff. For no reason.
Okay, item 5 on the agenda has been withdrawn by the applicant. Item 6 on the agenda has been withdrawn by applicant. Leaving item 7, which is 56 State Street, which is new construction and height District 4 in the old and historic district. They are requesting preliminary approval for a 50-room boutique hotel with amenities. I think we've got contact slides. I think everyone's familiar with this. It was recently. And applicants. Presentation.
Thanks for having me. I'm Eric Garris with Bello Garris Architects, and we're here tonight to ask for preliminary approval on the design development of the 56 State Street Hotel project. In transparency, and you'll see as we go through these drawings, over the course of time since we submitted this back in October for conceptual approval, we partnered with LS3P to assist us in doing the production work for this project, and have a very competent team with David and Trey, who are here from LS3P tonight, helping this project come to realization. So I feel like we've done a lot of work in making this building come alive and stay true to its integrity that we had presented in conceptual. And I'm excited to go through the modifications and changes, some of the difficulties and hardships, and just how we've been able to manage and mitigate those circumstances. So there were a number of staff and board comments at the previous meeting, and you guys have full access and record of those, so I'm going to go through those really quickly, and they're really categorically only 4. Brick color, the corner had some considerable conversation. The Juliet balconies, the incorporation of them better into the design, and also the north wall. We have adjusted those areas, some in contradiction to some of the board direction, but I do give you my word that we studied those. We pursued some of those options that were directed to us by the board, and found some to be difficult, challenging in today's climate of construction, procurement, and other things of that nature. Also, as part of this submittal, I'm going to let David speak to this a little bit more. The owner acquired the property early in 2023 and was able to do a lot more on-site investigation of the existing conditions that surround this property. And we've come up to some issues with the adjacent garage that lies directly to the east. So I'll let David speak to that. But the request we're making as a result of that finding is an additional 2 feet on that ground floor level. I don't feel like it negatively impacts the project because we worked really hard together to maintain the sense of proportion and stylization of the building without sacrificing any of its purity. So a few of these slides, you're fully aware, this is the Scotchman site that lies at the corner of Cumberland Estate. It was approved for demolition in the last meeting. Zooming in a little farther, some of the existing surrounding context, there are other projects that have been approved by the board that lie adjacent to this site as well, but we don't show because they're not in the ground yet. The existing streetscape is presented for the existing and proposed, or the former and proposed streetscapes. And I believe that as you look at these, there's little difference to the project as it was presented at the conceptual stage of presentation. Site plan, I'm going to let David pick up from here, and then I'll move back into the stylistic moves that we made to the building, but I want him to be able to speak to the surrounding property and some of the issues that I'll be discussing in a moment.
Thank you, Eric. David Burt with LS3P Architects. The before and after plan didn't change a whole lot, but you'll see highlighted in yellow here, that's actually the footings for the parking deck that is to the east is actually sticking underneath our slabs. So much so that even though the original proposal was to go down 2 feet to make the height work for the parking stackers, we can't go down, or we would be potentially up obstructing, endangering the structural integrity of the adjacent building, and physically touching it. We've been able to do that. So we worked with Eric, and I think he did a really good job of figuring out how to stretch that ground floor so that the 2 extra feet are relatively unnoticeable, and in my opinion, the building becomes, even better. I think that elongation of that vertical line is nice in the ground floor. You'll see the change here. The plan on the left was the original plan. You can see there was a slight ramp down to get into that space, and then stairs were incorporated to get up to the lobby level. We're just proposing to stay at grade now, just come straight in. With flooding issues we're dealing with in our community today, I'd like to avoid going down anyway. So I thought this was a decent response to the challenge that we were being presented. And I will say the plans didn't really change very much. The lobby is still to the left as it's presented on the plan here, and slightly on the corner. Cumberland as well, we did have to add a few offices. Down there, we did have like a little retail area that's now offices, but everything else is still relatively close to the same as it was. The upper floors, we still have the meeting space on the upper left side. We still have the mezzanine area open to the garage below, mechanical platform. The units didn't really change very much, moving up the building from floor to floor. We did eliminate the balcony that was up at the top floor facing the parking deck. Rooftop equipment will all be concealed and is pulled back from the edge as far as we can so that you won't see it from the street. And when Eric goes to the rendering, you'll be able to tell that none of that equipment is visible from the street.
Thanks, David. I think that's what you say when you pass off, so. Some of these images here just speak generally to the design sensibility that we try to achieve in the project, and I'm going to go through these fairly quickly because they're farther than the conceptual level. I did take a good look at some of the corner buildings in Charleston, and while I think this building stylistically, because it pays homage to a more traditional form, it's reinterpreted a little bit more modern way. But it could also be precedent setting in that respect because it's just really good architecture, I believe. And I think that as a team, we're going to be able to achieve that as a result. So, the majority of the buildings in Charleston do have, that are radius corners or faceted corners. These are prominent street corners in Charleston. And this being a secondary location, it allowed me a little bit more flexibility to study it in a way in which these necessarily need to present themselves differently. Materials for the building, we talked about brick before. I brought samples of the brick. We're thinking about a burgundy wire cut brick. I like a very clean line brick, something that's not tumbled or textured and tries to look old while the building really wants to look polished. And then the mortar joints also I'd like to see disappear so that you kind of appreciate the form of the building rather than the contrast of the brick and mortar. We're just proposing a dark bronze finish on the aluminum storefronts and all of the finishes that are aluminum, and I have a sample of that. For wood finish, we're just proposing, as shown here, for cap rails, just some naturally finished wood material, whether it be teak or sapele or ipe. And then for the brass on the building, we're proposing a brass powder coat material because true brass, unlacquered, doesn't do good in coastal environments. And so we're proposing something that would be at least a substitute for that might be acceptable by you guys. So I have samples of all of that here if you guys would like to take a look at it. As we move forward, really I'm gonna go through these pretty quickly. The building on the bottom is the proposed building of where we're currently at. You can see the rooftop equipment in this just because it's a pure elevation, but as you move away from the building perspective, all of that would go away because it is tucked recessed really far interior to the site. But I don't believe that you can tell a very noticeable change in this building and how we've blended that 2 feet across the proportions of the building. So I would say that I think the design is as successful now as it was before, but we have to have VAR approval to grant us the additional height on the first level. And so I would implore you to approve that tonight and agree with the assessment that we're making. Again, a rendered view of the before and the current. You can notice over the entry canopy, we've just detailed that very similarly to how we had before, but you can just start to appreciate the brass finish a little bit more. Another view moving in. West elevation, again, it's very similar to what it was before. Rendered view of the west elevation. West elevation. And on the east side, you can notice in the bottom right-hand corner, that is the side that lies adjacent to the garage, and it is the most pinched and restricted portion of the site, which would make it technically infeasible for us to apply material other than concrete block on that side. We cannot access that through the garage to lay a brick veneer on that wall. So what we're proposing there, because it's not visible to public view, is a painted CMU wall. And then as we go farther up, I believe at level 2, where it's shown as brick, we should be able to put the brick veneer on at that level. On the left-hand side of that bottom image, it's wider at that corner, so you are able to get it. And we did think that it was important because that was a direct view from the public right of way off of the state of Cumberland Street. And then you can also notice too that we've pulled some of the balconies off the back because it's interior to the block. And honestly, I don't think you'd ever see this facade because of the garage there. Anyway. This is a view looking southeast, and I will speak to the north wall in a moment. We did try to articulate that north wall. Again, it's a zero lot line condition. It's very challenging to do anything on a zero lot line condition. If you go around Charleston, which you guys have probably more than me, and you pay attention to the walls that are off of primary streets, you will find a ton of blank brick walls. So we did try to pull a portion of that brick wall out stylistically so that the run didn't feel so long and oppressive, but felt more segmented, and hopefully it would help mitigate the expanse of that wall, not being able to have any openings. That's the north wall, before and current below. Corner. Corner had some comments from the board last time, and I actually studied it. One of the comments was whether the radius should be expanded. Looking at other corner buildings in Charleston that have a true radius, those are all of a much different time period. And again, like I mentioned originally in the presentation tonight, the objective of this project is to appear traditional while expressing a sense of modernity. The tighter radius on the corner, to me, allows it to operate in that way, and represent some hearkening to a traditional stylization, but also the tight corner radius serves as an inspiration for other areas in the building in which we're picking up on. You could look in some of the renderings and you can see the corners of the Juliet balconies. We have a very tight radius on those so that they feel more purposefully designed and part of a larger whole. And also on the interior of the project too, for openings and cased openings and trim. We've got a lot of tight radius elements that start to be derived from this larger move at the corner. So I feel holistically it works as a project, and I like to see projects start with a large idea and move to the minutia, and then the memory of the origin can be felt throughout the project. So I would ask that you guys, be in support of a tighter corner on the radius. And also to a particular board member's comment before about the corner being a precedent-setting building. We did study trying to obtain a bent glass that was impact rated on the corner. We contacted multiple glazing manufacturers that are out there that provide glazing for probably most of all the projects in Charleston. And they all said that it would be next to impossible for them to provide us with a radius impact glazing for the corner of this project. So what we did, because it has such a tight series of segments that march around. We're proposing to hold the horizontal lines of the material finish to a true curve form. Express fins that are up vertically between levels 2 and 3, as we had previously presented, that continue to reinforce that curvature of the corner, but install segmented or flat planar glazing in 3 of the bays so that we can achieve hopefully at least something as close to what we had presented in conceptual that was architectural direction alone. And then just a few renderings here of the prior and the current. Again, previous at the top and current proposed at the bottom, and I don't feel like the change at the corner is negative or detrimental to the overall design and stylization of the building. And then details that we've been developing to prove that the design is feasible. More details that we've studied with LS3P, and they've done a great job being responsive to the design and being thoughtful in how we are going to go about achieving the detail of the building. I believe that's it.
Any board questions?
Yeah, how about let's speak again about the wall that's gonna butt up to the parking garage and also the north wall. Let's look at that one more time. And also, there's a company in Anderson, South Carolina called Desmond, Desmond, that manufactures curved laminated glass. It's really cool.
For impact rated, we contacted Oldcastle and they said we can't do it.
Yeah, it's just for interest, right? We've been using them for a while. It's pretty interesting.
Any questions in particular?
Yeah, about the area that's going to be exposed.
You want to go to the east?
Yeah, and then I know that was the north elevation, and just thinking about that towering wall over that small structure. It's just a tough situation, but it's hard to figure out a good way to deal with that. And I'm not offering any suggestions. It's just you can imagine. I think at our last meeting I used a project that was down on East Bay Street that we went and looked at. That Al agreed eventually was going to be covered up, but it's your project at the what's the name of it, Jay?
The one across the street.
The one on Marson Drive. It has the big white wall on the backside.
Oh, the tech center garage.
The tech center, you know, and so we met down there and we talked about how you've got that big massive wall. Eventually something's going to be built next door, but it would cover that up. And here we're going to be staring at this north wall for forever. It's a tough. And I don't know if this is board. I just thought if you had any other comments about it, I'm just struggling with it.
Yeah, I guess in the form of a question to the applicant, if you have any additional information you'd like to provide.
Yeah, fair enough.
Consideration. If not, then that's.
If what now?
Do you have any additional information you'd like to provide in consideration of these two unfinished rate routes?
I really don't. I would have to agree with Mr. Metter's comment. I mean, they're very challenging conditions to solve. You know, in a city that's becoming more progressive, becoming more dense, we do have these anomalies, these pockets of, you know, historic structures. And while this is not as historic, being built in the 80s, I mean, it's still a smaller structure, and Charleston's scale used to be much different. You know, I look at it in both senses. One, it's unfair to the designer to hold them against what's there when you're allowed to do something else, right? But it's up to us to try and find something that is sensitive, and at least from a perspective of trying to do the most with the lease that you have, right? And so I do believe that, by proposing the same stylization, the same detailing, and the same character on that wall, it should blend in with the rest of the architecture. I know that it's going to be a north wall that you see and you notice, and unfortunately, it will very unlikely have some partner next to it that conceals it. But I'd hate to see that held against this project, because to do the things in buildings in Charleston anymore, to spend money on sides that never going to have any sort of return, you have to look at it sense of responsibility to your client as well. And just to add fire rated glazing or something like that for the sake of, blending or false, openings in a wall, I don't know if it paints the true story of what this building is. So I can appreciate it, and I did give that thought, Mr. Matters. And this is really kind of where we landed in terms of trying to break the scale up so we created a
I had a question. There may be other more questions. I had a question. In a few of the renderings, it appears that the brick is faceted around the corner, but in plan, it appears to be a smooth radius. It is a smooth radius, right?
We are calling for the corner brick to be cast so that it is a radius brick.
With a radius face. Okay.
With a radius face, yes.
Any other more questions?
Yeah. Eric, I'm going back to north elevation.
Okay.
I had a similar situation in one of the first recent projects. And I actually was able to figure it out, its ins and outs. I know the plan may be affected, but you still can probably explore a little bit more, because this is extremely heavy part. I mean, most of it is solid wall. So I'm still asking to study more.
Fair enough.
Would it be fair to ask the neighbor? Because I do happen to know that the neighbor is interested in redeveloping that parcel and will not be building a 1 or 2 story building, but want to go taller. And this is, expected that his building would end up being very similar to this, with a face that would be pretty solid.
I don't think that's something that we can
Yeah,
consider.
that seems logical, but we have to deal in as much concreteness as we can. So I don't want to drift into conjecture.
I walk down King Street, the office is right next to the Target, so I walk down King Street every day. And the building that Trident's building or renovating right now is gorgeous. I'm actually gonna go tour it on Friday. I really love that renovation that they did. But it is interesting that one facade that faces south, it sticks up and it looks like this, which is interesting to me because the next door neighbor could go up if they want like building. Is that the intersection of
It's the old sign too.
In the Sonic Lodge?
One more thinking of.
Yeah, it was one that I just noticed. That's because I wouldn't be thinking about it if I wasn't working on this building, but kind of looking.
It is interesting. I've been out on that adjacent roof looking at that, and it's, yeah, you're right.
I'm sorry, but if nothing else, you probably can figure it out how to decorate that side. At least that.
Well, at this
Involve
point,
the metal, painting, murals, I don't know.
well, I think at this point, let's just stick to any questions.
Right.
I have a question.
So another question I have very quickly, the column that it's kind of like spindle. Is that structural? Do you really have to have it?
You don't have to have the corner column. The objective is to provide that column as a reference to corner buildings in Charleston, small corner buildings that you see with a small column that holds the corner that's eroded. It was shown in the conceptual approval, and we are going to use that because that recessed balcony on the 4th floor we're gonna use that to tie in our storm water for drainage up and down the building. And then wrap that column.
It's very odd for the whole building, but I'm just asking.
I think it's a little bit strange without it, because then you have this cantilever corner that just, to me.
One last question, is 2 feet, you're talking about, are they just within the overall height, because you said it's additional 2 feet? And it's hard to,
So if you look,
So you basically, you've gone from 58
to 60.
to 60.
Right, and
Okay,
we've
so
gone,
it's-
we're proposing 20 to 22. We had 22 feet before, but that was from the depressed garage to the second floor, and we had 20 feet from the first level lobby to the second floor. But because of the issues of the garage and trying to be a good neighbor, not undermine and destabilize that garage, causes the
I guess it's invisible because I cannot tell visually the difference.
I will
It's
note
fine.
for the board, I know Mr. Brown has a question, that going beyond 21 feet for the first floor does require specific board approval.
So I bring this up because you said it twice in your presentation, that, and I want you to explain it to me. Your goal here is for the building to appear traditional with a nod to modernity. What is the virtue of that statement?
Well, the virtue would be a personal sentiment, because stylistically, I don't really try to design buildings that are direct interpretations. Stylistically, with certain elements or cornice or capitals or stylistic elements that you would see on buildings that were built in the 1800s, early 1900s here. I try to take the proportions or some of the language from those buildings and then really kind of take from that a lesson that I can apply in a more modern way. I don't know if that explains it very well, but I don't really design with the strict vocabulary of the past. I try to understand what those rules were and then apply those today. Something that's cleaner, fresher, that fits in with the context, because you can feel the spirit of the past in the building of today.
Good take, thank you.
Any further questions? If not, we'll move into public comment. I think we have several members of the public that would like to speak on this application. There's nothing following it, so it's got to be done. I will reiterate, since some people have come and gone, I will reiterate something I said at the outset of the meeting. That's about the board's purview, and just for the sake of procedural due process, please note that the purview of this board excludes zoning matters such as land use, the function of a building, things like parking or traffic, the building concerns such as noise or garbage. So if you're going to speak on this application, please restrict your comments to the architectural proposal. Also, I'll note for this application, having already received conceptual approval, much of the building's height, scale, and mass, although the applicant has reintroduced height a little bit into the conversation, and its general architectural direction, were approved at conceptual review several months ago. So with that in mind, any members of the public that wish to speak on this application? Great.
As a point, Mr. Chairman, there were 2 comments that were submitted
Yes.
to us that we were able to review prior to tonight.
Yes. Okay. And those were distributed yesterday. Okay. Hearing none. Staff comments or recommendations?
Yes. Overall, project has changed very little, and minor changes are, for the most part, evolving in the right direction. A common board comment regarding making the radius at the entry corner larger. While this has has not been done. A thin canopy has been added to extend the covering at this corner and an extra bay to each side. The board needs to decide if this satisfies the desired speed or larger radius. It is hard to determine change in brick color, and samples will be need to be presented to the board for approval. Staff conditions for approval. Even though the added step and north wall helps, staff finds the previous version of the north wall more successful in breaking up the large planar mass through greater articulation. Due to its proximity to the smaller structure to the north, this wall should be broken up a little bit more with further horizontal articulation. Considering how tight the parking is and it's potentially attractive use with the door remaining open at peak times during the day, both a primarily opaque door needs to be provided at the vehicular entry, and exterior materials need to be brought inside of the parking area to a minimum of 25 feet or to a point which visually makes sense. A ceiling and specialty paving will also need to be provided at this area. A comprehensive signage package needs to be presented for approval at final. Material approvals need to be finalized by the board at final as well. And our recommendation is preliminary approval with board and staff conditions with approval of the additional height of the first floor.
All right, 5 minutes for an applicant response.
I like to use my time. Just kidding. Well, thank you, Lawrence, for those comments. I definitely think that as the project moves forward, there's always opportunity to continue to make something better than it is now. And I still feel, in addition to LS3P, I feel that we're moving this project in the right direction. It's a project that we'd be proud to have in Charleston. So I just say that we are asking for preliminary approval tonight with details to be submitted at final review submittal, contrary to the last presentation. We'll bring it down.
Okay, board discussion.
I really like the building. But again, I think the north elevation needs to be still looked at. I personally don't have any issues with tight corner radius. I think it's just all in same theme of the facades. So, there are a few staff comments which again needs to be looked at, but I would be in agreement for preliminary approval if we can address some of these comments.
I mean, the high school mass issue is taken care of. Want to talk for a minute about that 2 feet? How does that impact us here today? Because it does potentially impact high school mass.
Yeah, I think it impacts, it does obviously impact the height of the building. It's still a 4-story building, so it doesn't completely reopen the discussion, but I will admit rather embarrassingly that I did not notice in the drawings. And I looked at this one pretty closely out of personal interest. So, I mean, I think it's worth discussion, but I don't think it really gets into the realm of, well, maybe this thing will be 3.5 stories or anything.
I agree with that. I mean, the big picture, I can support this also, but I can't support it tonight with the way that the north wall is proposed. So something's a restudy of that north wall with the other comments and conversation we had with Eric and David, it would be a motion that I would make. But I think with figuring something out with that, and again, I don't know what that is, I certainly could support the project moving forward.
I agree with the comments made that the north wall is the biggest sticking point for all of us, and it was at conceptual as well. And from the plans presented tonight, there was not enough time and consideration into what could be done there. And because of projects in the past that had not turned out as we expected, Charleston Tech Center being the example in my mind, we need to know before we move the project along that this is going to be managed and managed well. So I would support a deferral.
Yeah, I think the additional 2 feet is fine. I think I was the one that was rattling on about the double cantilever. I think so. And the column actually resolved that. So I'm fine with that column being there. And the radius, if the brick is radius, then it's going to be smooth, because one of the drivers for why the radius was to disguise the faceted nature of the brick. But if you're going to radius the brick, then that's great. The north wall is a big deal. Now, you would have to put a tremendous setback on that north side in order to open up the facade with fenestration that you see in the street. And I think that would be kind of beyond the pale, but there are things that can be done. And zero lot line conditions happen all over Charleston, and they're location specific. And in this case, this wall stares straight at the market, and we can't really consider at this stage whether the adjacent property might be redeveloped. We have to take it as we see it. So I, in this case, agree with the deferral, specifically, these board and staff comments, but specifically to restudy that north elevation. Those are my comments.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion for deferral with board and staff comments, but including the conversational questions and answers we have with Eric and David during the presentation, and specifically restudying the north wall, and also on the east wall, just to make sure the visibility of the CMU versus the brick, and when is it visible or not visible, and how that wall's being treated. And it may be fine. I can't tell. This,
How much that eastern wall is visible too?
Remind me, how tall is the parking garage in feet, if you could guess?
We will incorporate a site section next time, because we've got that, it's in our drawings, it's just we didn't submit it. But at that third level, you can see over it.
So what I've got here is a deferral with board and staff comments, including Q&A. Since it was a little bit of both, specifically restudying north and east walls. After it.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Motion made by Mr. Matters. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Brown. I will go down the roll. Mr. Subject, how do you vote?
Yes.
Matters.
Yay in favor.
Brown.
Yay in favor.
I vote likewise. Yay in favor. The motion carries 4-0.
Thank you.
Reading anyway. Hopefully you can just tell who
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Question on that.